sitting on $1.20 million in a brokerage account, staring at a $990,000 apartment in New York City. No mortgage needed, just write the check. That's the position one Reddit user is in right now, and the math that feels obvious here is actually the wrong math. Hey Profiteer, Eric here. Welcome back to Real Money Stories. Today's episode comes from the personalfinance subreddit, and it's about a 42-year-old single New Yorker trying to decide whether wiping out a 7-figure brokerage account for an all-cash apartment purchase is smart or, in their words, dumb. Here's the situation laid out with real numbers, which is exactly why this one generated over 500 comments. Let me read it to you in their own words. I'm looking at a $990,000 apartment in NYC, and I have about $1.2 million in a taxable brokerage account. The catch is that I'd have to pay cash, so after taxes, my entire brokerage would be essentially wiped out if I did this. I also currently have about $130,000 in cash sell in FYSA and about $600,000 in my 401k. I make $140,000 a year and have no debt. The apartment does have a $1,500 month maintenance fees, which includes property taxes. ED, I'm 42 and single? Okay. First thing I want to say, reading this is a genuinely good problem to have, and I mean that with zero sarcasm. A 42-year-old with $1.20 million invested, $130,000 in cash, $600,000 in retirement, no debt, and a $140,000 salary has done almost everything right for 2 decades. This isn't a rescue story, it's a how do I not mess up a great position story, and those deserve just as much care. I've been writing about money for over a decade, and the pattern I keep seeing with people who reach this level of success is this. The habits that got you here, save aggressively, invest consistently, avoid debt, can actually work against you at the next decision. Because the next decision isn't about discipline anymore, it's about capital allocation. And that's a completely different skill. So here's what I'd probably do in this person's shoes. Let's walk through it. First framework, the opportunity cost of capital. Every dollar you have only gets to do one job at a time. And here's why that matters so much in this specific case. If that $1.20 million stays invested in a diversified portfolio historically, over long periods, it has a reasonable chance of averaging somewhere in the high single digits annually, though obviously nothing is guaranteed and any year could be down double digits. Pull it all out to buy a home in cash, and that money's job changes completely. It stops compounding and starts just being a place to live, a valuable place, sure. But dead money in terms of growth. The next step here is simple. Before doing anything else, run the actual numbers on what that brokerage account could reasonably be expected to return over 20 years versus what's saved in mortgage interest. Don't guess. Calculate it. Second framework, and this is the one most people commenting on this post probably got wrong, cost basis and the capital gains cliff. The post says liquidating essentially wipes out the brokerage after taxes. That's the tell. If this account has been building for years, a big chunk of that $1.20 million isn't principal, it's gains. And depending on how long it's been held and the actual cost basis, we could be talking about a capital gains tax bill of $150,000, $200,000, maybe more due all at once in a single tax year. That's not a rounding error. That's a decision-changing number. The next step is to actually pull the cost basis on every lot in that account before doing anything else, because the real after-tax number might be nowhere close to $1.20 million. Now, up to this point, this looks like a pretty textbook, don't sell your assets answer. Here's where it stops being textbook. Because the obvious answer, never pay cash, always take the cheap mortgage, isn't automatically right either. And here's the wrinkle. This person makes $140,000 a year in New York City buying a $990,000 home. A typical mortgage on that purchase, even a modest one, could easily run $4,500 to $6,000 a month once you add in the maintenance fee already mentioned. That's a third to nearly half of gross income going to housing in one of the most expensive cities in the country for someone who's single with only one income covering it. That's a real strain that a spreadsheet full of average market returns doesn't capture. Markets don't always average. Some years they drop 20-30%, and if that happens while you're also carrying a large mortgage payment on a single income, the math on paper and the stress in real life are two very different things. Third framework, the liquidity and emergency fund rule. The general guideline most planners point to is somewhere between 3 and 6 months of essential expenses kept easily accessible, and this person has $130,000 in a high-yield savings account, which is well beyond that. That's actually a real strength here, and it matters for this decision specifically because it means even in a partial cash, partial mortgage scenario, there's a cushion. The next step would be to protect that HYSA cushion no matter which path gets chosen. Don't let it get pulled into the down payment. That's the one pool of money that stays untouched. Fourth framework, and this is probably the most practical resolution here, what I'd call the middle path mortgage. Instead of treating this as all cash versus wipe out the brokerage, there's a third option. Put down a meaningful chunk, say $300,000 to $400,000, keep the rest of the brokerage invested and growing, and take a mortgage for the remainder. And here's why that works. It protects the tax-efficient growth of the majority of that portfolio. It avoids triggering the full capital gains hit in one shot, and it still gets a comfortable monthly payment relative to that $140,000 income. This is worth running by a fee-only financial planner or a CPA because the exact split depends heavily on that cost basis we talked about earlier and on current mortgage rates. And just a friendly reminder that this episode is intended for entertainment and education purposes only and should not be considered financial or legal advice. Everyone's tax situation and risk tolerance is different, so talk to a qualified financial advisor about your specific numbers before making a move like this. The specific numbers here were $990,000 and $1.20 million and a New York City zip code. But the principle underneath all of it applies no matter what the numbers are. Big capital, illiquid purchases deserve to be broken into pieces. Tax exposure, opportunity cost, monthly cash flow, liquidity cushion, and evaluated separately instead of collapsed into one gut feeling yes or no. Whether you're deciding on a $990,000 apartment or a $90,000 one, that's the same discipline. If you found this helpful, share it with someone dealing with the same thing. Until next time, stay profitable.